Hey everyone and welcome. Labor Day. That sweet sigh of the unofficial end of summer. But have you ever stopped to think, why do we get this day off? Is it really just about hot dogs and hitting the beach? What if I told you the real story behind Labor Day is actually kind of intense? Think protests, strikes, corporate greed, and even federal troops clashing with citizens in the streets. Stick around because we're about to dive into the surprisingly dramatic origins of this beloved American holiday. All right, so here we are, probably firing up the grill, maybe thinking about that last dip in the pool. Labor Day. Feels like it's always been around, right? Just another day off. But where did this day actually come from? I mean, most holidays have some sort of backstory. What's Labor Day's deal? Now, to really understand Labor Day, we gotta hop in our historical time machine and zoom back to the late 19th century. The Gilded Age. America was booming, factories were churning out goods, and skyscrapers were starting to pierce the skyline. But underneath all that glittery progress, life for the average worker was, well, pretty rough. Think long work hours, tough conditions, and not a whole lot of vacation time going around. Seriously, people were working like crazy. This is where things start to get interesting, because all that hard work without much reward, well, it made people pretty unhappy. And that unhappiness started to bubble up into something called the labor movement. We're talking about passionate people standing up for their rights, some pretty dramatic events, and even a bit of mystery about who actually came up with the idea for Labor Day. And trust me, it's not as simple as someone just saying, hey, let's have a 3-day weekend. Hey, if you're finding this story as fascinating as I am, and you're curious to learn more about the history behind the things we often take for granted, then please consider hitting that subscribe button. Our goal here is to bring you these kinds of fun and informative deep dives into history, culture, and all sorts of interesting stuff. Your support helps us keep digging up these stories and sharing them with you. So if you're enjoying the ride, give us a little love and subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. All right, let's get down to brass tacks. What were working conditions actually like back then? Well, imagine 10, 12, even 16-hour workdays, 6 days a week, in buildings with no air conditioning and very little light. And the pay? Barely enough to get by. Safety regulations? Pretty much non-existent. We're talking dangerous machinery with no guards, mines filled with toxic dust, and a whole lot of risk just to earn a living. If you got hurt on the job, there was no worker comp, no safety net. You were just out of a job. And it wasn't just adults. Child labor was a huge problem. Kids, some as young as 5 or 6, were working in factories and mines, often doing the most dangerous jobs because they were small enough to fit into tight spaces. It's honestly heartbreaking to look back at. And get this, in many places you had company towns where one single company owned everything. The houses, the stores, the schools. They would often pay you in scrip, a special currency you could only use at the company store, where prices were, you guessed it, ridiculously high. It was a system designed to keep workers permanently in debt and under the company's thumb. Yeah, complaining about Monday mornings looks a little different when you compare it to, dodging runaway factory equipment while being paid money you can only spend at your boss's overpriced grocery store. So, understandably, workers started organizing. They formed labor unions to collectively bargain for better wages, shorter hours, and safer workplaces. Early groups like the Knights of Labor and later the American Federation of Labor started gaining traction. But these weren't always polite negotiations, folks. We're talking strikes, protests, and some pretty intense clashes. Tensions often boiled over, like in the infamous Haymarket Affair in Chicago in 1886, where a peaceful rally turned deadly after a bomb was thrown. The event was a major setback for the labor movement in the short term, as it was used to paint unions as violent and radical. But it also showed how high the stakes were. These unions were fighting an uphill battle against powerful industries that weren't exactly thrilled about paying their workers more or giving them time off. Imagine trying to convince your boss back then that you needed a work-life balance. You'd probably get a blank stare followed by a hearty chuckle.
So now, here's where the Labor Day story gets a little, well, let's just say there's some historical debate. Two main guys are often credited with the idea for Labor Day. Peter J. McGuire, a carpenter and co-founder of the American Federation of Labor, and Mattie McGuire, no relation, who served as secretary of the Central Labor Union in New York. Both were involved in early efforts to establish a day recognizing workers. McGuire's supporters point to an 1882 speech where he proposed a day to honor those who, from rude nature, have delved and carved all the grandeur we behold. Matthew McGuire's camp points to records showing he was the one who actually organized New York's first ever Labor Day parade in 1882. It's like a historical who but war at best, but for holidays. Different cities and different unions started holding Labor Day celebrations on different dates. These early events weren't exactly the chill BBQs we know today. We're talking parades to show the strength and solidarity of the workers, speeches about labor rights, and sometimes even picnics. So while the spirit was there, the official day and the details were still being ironed out. So, with all this momentum building, what was the final push that made Labor Day a national holiday? It all comes down to one of the most dramatic showdowns in American labor history, the Pullman Strike of 1894. You see, George Pullman, owner of Pullman Palace Car Company, which made luxury training cars, had built a whole company town for his workers just outside Chicago. On the surface, it looked great. Neat brick houses, parks, library. But Pullman controlled everything, and the rent was high. In the middle of a severe economic depression in 1893, Pullman decided to cut his workers' wages by nearly 30%, but he refused to lower the rent in his company town. So yeah, people were taking home less money, but still had to pay the same high prices to the same guy who just cut their pay. The workers were obviously furious. They went on strike. In a massive show of solidarity, the American Railway Union, led by the legendary Eugene Debs, joined in, refusing to handle any train that had a Pullman car attached. This brought the nation's entire rail system, especially west of Chicago, to a grinding halt. The country was paralyzed. This is where the federal government steps in. President Grover Cleveland, facing pressure from railroad executives, had a problem. He declared the strike a federal crime because it was disrupting the delivery of U.S. mail, which was, transported by train. He sent 12,000 U.S. Army troops to Chicago to break the strike. The result was chaos and violence. Clashes broke out, rail yards were burned, and dozens of people were killed. It was a brutal, bloody affair, and public opinion was turning against Cleveland for his heavy-handed response. So, how did we go from these scattered celebrations and now this violent federal crackdown to the Labor Day we know today? Well, the Pullman Strike was a PR nightmare for President Cleveland. The country was horrified. In an attempt to repair the damage and appease the angry and powerful labor movement, Cleveland and Congress rushed to make a gesture of peace. Just 6 days after the federal troops ended the strike, Congress unanimously passed legislation making Labor Day a national holiday, and Cleveland signed it into law. So in a way, the holiday was born directly from one of the most dramatic and violent labor disputes in our history. It was a reconciliation gest, a political move to calm things out. Think about it. This was a huge victory for the labor movement. It was a recognition of the vital contributions that working people made to the country. It wasn't just about getting a day off. It was about acknowledging the importance of fair labor practices. But here's the thing. The story of Labor Day isn't just the dusty old history lesson. It's a reminder of the struggles that people went through to secure the rights and the quality of life that many of us enjoy today. Things like the 8-hour workday, weekends, workplace safety regulations, and the end of widespread child labor. Those weren't just handed out. They were fought for, often at great cost. And that fight isn't over. Today, we talk about the gig economy, the right to disconnect, a living wage, and the push for a 4-day week. These are all modern versions of the same conversations people were having back in the 1880s. The fundamental questions about the value of labor, a worker's rights, and the balance between work and life are still incredibly relevant. So while you're enjoying that hot dog or relaxing by the pool this Labor Day, take a second to remember the people who paved the way. It's a holiday with a real purpose. A holiday that reminds us of the importance of fair treatment and the power of collective action. And maybe, just maybe, understanding that history makes that day off feel a little bit more meaningful. So this Labor Day, let's celebrate the workers, past and present, who built this country. And maybe, just maybe, appreciate that extra day off a little bit more knowing the story behind it. All right, everyone, that's the surprising story behind Labor Day. Did you learn something new? Let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts and any other historical holidays you're curious about. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps us out. And don't forget to subscribe for more fun and informative deep dives into history and other cool topics. Thanks for watching and have a fantastic Labor Day weekend.